This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
Hi, and welcome to the AeroHP.com studios here in Concord, North Carolina for Rob Fisher, your host for the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast. Today we've got a great asset with us, a gentleman named Randy Mays. Randy goes back years. How long have we known each other?
Since the early 90s.
Yeah, early 1990s, right?
1990s, yeah.
1990s. and Randy and I kind of grew up together in the human organizational performance world of nuclear power. And we come from a little bit of diverse background. So I'm going to let Randy introduce himself. And today on the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast, we're going to talk about some tiebacks to the element of the essential leadership cycle related to clear roles and processes, and how one of the experts in the world of effective written guidance uses the essential leadership cycle to help organizations understand how that all fits with clear roles and processes and how we do work. So welcome, Randy.
Glad to be here. So Rob and I met, like I said, back in the 1990s at one of our plants, and at the time, I had no idea what human performance was. We were not really using that term. It was something that we were forced into when the regulators came in and said, hey, you need to understand human performance. And I was in procedures, developing procedures at the time. And I got to know Rob because part of our effort was we were told we did not have very good processes and procedures. They had to be upgraded. And Rob volunteered to understand and try to search out what human performance was. So we worked together and separately as we went down that path, and kind of an interesting time, if you will. I learned a lot.
Yeah. I mean, back in the old days, it was, we were constantly putting procedures and human organizational performance together. Now today, it seems that not too many people connect those things as being direct connects.
No, they don't. You know, one of the things that human performance wants us to do is bring consistency into what we're doing. Well, if you do something and I try to do something, but there's no guidance between the two of us as to how to do that, we get an inconsistent outcome. I mean, you do something your way, I do it my way. We're trying to come to the same end, but quality's different, timing may be different, a number of different things are different, and we need a process or something to help us get consistency there.
So part of the clarity of roles and process attribute of the essential leadership cycle is really having good processes and programs that are followable.
Yes. Absolutely.
And part of being followable is to not build in air traps and things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey on that? Because you started as a nuclear procedure writer.
Yeah.
But really you can't go out there and nuke people.
No. And you don't want to.
No pun intended, obviously.
Yeah. We had procedures for virtually everything. There was nothing that we could do that we didn't have written guidance for along the way. Well, that is very restrictive and not necessarily something that you want, because there's some things that you just don't need written guidance for. Something that you do routinely, something that's a habit, and something that's very simple with no real critical steps, then maybe I don't need a procedure for that. I know how to do it.
And we even need clarity of roles and process around that fact, right?
Yeah.
That we kind of need a process for identifying whom we do and whom we don't, and what the level of detail ought to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as the task becomes more complex, then we do need guidance to help us stay within the path of where we need to go, and allow flexibility. And flexibility is not, well, go take care of something. It's telling us within what parameters we can take care of something.
Yeah.
Not just shooting for a target where we don't know where it is.
Yeah, that's good. So how's that changed for you, being kind of a guru of human performance and procedures in the nuclear world, and then shifting out into all other industry?
Well, what you find is varying levels of written guidance or places for people to go to get information on how to do a task. I've walked into some places that they weren't sure what I meant when I even said written guidance. Well, what do you mean? People just do our jobs here. When you sit down and explain, they said, yeah, I guess we do need some of that to help with our quality, and some light bulbs have really gone off saying, wow, that would really help us to have a consistent outcome that I could repeat with everybody that came into. I could give them some training, give them some supervision, and give them a document to follow, and I could get the consistent outcome I'm looking for.
Yeah. So what do you think when you go into some of these senior leaders and you hear them say, well, you don't understand. We've got good processes. If we could just get people to follow them, we'd be okay.
Well, I do hear that. And I usually try to help them understand that, have you actually looked at what you're doing? If the processes help the people, they will use them. But if it hinders it, then they get pushed aside. And you say, well, I've got good processes. It's nice, well formatted. It's in, a clear font, and it's legible. Why don't people use it? Well, it's not helpful. It's not helping them get the job done. It actually may be a detriment. It's an impedance to it. So if you write the procedures and the processes to the way you actually do something and give them help, getting the task performed, then they'll use them.
And a lot of places use technical, what they believe are good technical writers.
Right.
And they generally produce technically accurate documents.
Yep.
But the problem is more usability than accuracy.
If I have to know something besides what's written down, how do I pass that along to someone else behind me? This works, but I have to know that I have a certain set of steps I have to do before I even get to the written document to help to do that. And if that's not written down somewhere, then this isn't really helpful.
And we usually tie things back in the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast to what now we know as the driving elements. And even though we're talking about clear rules and processes, that's really a self and team awareness attribute, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And then you can help understand how it all fits together by saying, how does this process we're trying to create fit with our vision and values? Is it a critical attribute to our business?
Right.
Or is it not?
And team and self-awareness, we have to realize what people are we using to do this task. If they're 20-year veterans and have done it for the past 20 years, that audience is completely different than the person that's been here for 6 months to a year and just learning the job. So that level of detail has to accommodate those variances in your workforce.
Yeah. And, outside of work, we have an entire generation of people, and I even do a lot of this myself, that expect that if they want to know how to do something, they go onto YouTube and they search it and they find it and they know how to do that. If we're not accommodating things like that, we're back to self and team awareness, shared vision and values, and clarity of roles and processes. The way I'm used to getting information isn't how I get it anymore.
Right. That
throws some almost lack of trust into the mix. So we're all back in that essential leadership cycle again.
Exactly. What's the best way to communicate with that set of individuals? Do they need embedded videos or something to help them along, or is just written document in a hard copy what we give them? We have to understand where they came from and they're learning how they learned and where they got to where they are.
And you teach all of this, right?
Yes,
this
I do.
Is part of the stuff that you teach in your effective written guidance.
Right.
Is that 2.5 days?
It is.
And those we can go on improvewithfit.com and search out the open enrollments and find out when and where you teach those. Right?
Absolutely. We usually try to get one a quarter. Sometimes we have more, and we look to bring people in that are interested in writing, and even the writers and the managers that manage writers. And a lot of times, you don't have just a person that their entire job is writing a procedure. They have other responsibilities. Right. This kind of is an auxiliary function. And so it's good for them to see and understand, it's more than just typing something in a word processor. There's some things there's error traps that we write into our procedures, the way we word things, the words that we use, not using common or using terms that mean different things can cause confusion. And so we teach to recognize that and to avoid those type of things.
And you actually have a grading regimen for that, right?
Yes, we do.
People who really like numbers can grade their written guidance.
Yeah. And it tells you how many traps, that may be in this document and gives you a grade based on those traps.
And then the more traps, the higher the probability somebody's going to make a mistake that in that procedure process.
That's right.
Well, Randy, thank you very much for helping us with clarity of roles and processes. I'm really glad you were here, and we'll see you next time on the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.